I've decided to really kick the bee's nest, the hornet's nest, and just do a quick video talking about kind of hindsight on Dragon Age: The Veilguard, a game that I gave my game of the year in 2024 when it came out. How I feel about that now, and what I think that game means for the future of BioWare, and how it may not be what you think. Let's get into it. Dragon Age: The Veilguard is kind of a unique thing for me. To just put the premise out for me, where I kind of am in the fandom and all that, is that I'm a noob, an outsider, a tourist in the Dragon Age, fandom, right? I only got into Mass Effect in 2021 when the Legendary Edition came out. I was aware of Dragon Age. I vaguely remember Inquisition coming out and people liking it. I'm sure I noticed it. It won the first Game of the Year award, even though I don't know if I was watching the TGAs back then. Dragon Age 1 and 2, I worked at GameStop when those were out. I probably noticed them. I wasn't an RPG guy back then. So, going into Veilguard, I was very much an outsider, a tourist, a BioWare and Mass Effect fan who was just curious and excited for the next thing BioWare was doing. For me, it was almost a sign of life, a proof of life. I had been covering the next Mass Effect game for a few years, knowing that Veilguard was obviously Dreadwolf at the time, but Veilguard eventually was the next thing that was going to come out before they would even, probably start working on the game I cared about. So I paid attention to it because I think it was going to be a sign of where BioWare was at, for better or worse, right? So I don't go into this and talk about it with any kind of authority of like, my opinion on Veilguard is correct and everyone else is wrong, because that's definitely not true. And the comments in the video I made where I said it's a good game reminded me that people disagree with me, and that's okay. As a year and a half, we'll be coming up on 2 years before too long since that game came out. I feel like I mostly still feel the same about it. But I still think what's most interesting about Veilguard to talk about isn't really my take on it, which, to summarize it, and I'm sure I'll expand a little bit, is that I think it's a good game with a cool story and some cool characters that has a lot of weaknesses, but that it was a game I enjoyed playing, learning the story about, getting more lore about the world, and I think the ending's awesome. I think the final act is one of BioWare's best, if not their best, even if it's basically Mass Effect 2, but still, I think it's pretty cool. But what I think is more interesting with Veilguard is how the discourse around it was a complete nightmare, right? And what I think gets lost in that is that most people, whether you like the game or not, like an average gamer like myself, someone who isn't really into the BioWare or specifically the Dragon Age community, maybe missed in all of this was that the most vocal and the loudest opposition to Veilguard were the weirdos, were the gross, anti-woke, anti-DEI, my life is terrible, so I'm gonna make everyone else miserable kind of people, right? Who didn't really have much to stand on, but that doesn't matter, as we all know. They have a platform, they're real loud, they have a bunch of other losers who agree with them about things, so they can just kind of say whatever they want, even if it makes no sense, and they'll have a bunch of, dorks agreeing with them and making their voices louder than they should be, right? And that side of the people who didn't like Veilguard are just, I think they should just be ignored. I don't think they have good points. I don't think they have good, basis for how they feel about things. I don't think they are worth listening to. But that doesn't explain the whole story, right? Because the part of the community, the gaming community, who didn't like Veilguard, who I think are really, really important to listen to, were actually like OG Dragon Age fans. And this isn't universal. And so please don't take this as me saying like every Dragon Age fan hated Veilguard. They obviously didn't. Check out social media. There's plenty of people, content creators, regular gamers, all that, who loved Veilguard, who like Dragon Age 1, 2, and Inquisition, right? But there were a number of people, especially people I was interacting with at the time, especially, who were Dragon Age fans, BioWare fans, maybe Mass Effect, but not exclusively. Like, not everyone. There's people who like Dragon Age and could care less about Mass Effect, kind of how I like Mass Effect, and couldn't really care much about Dragon Age, right? And what I found was that there was a larger number of those people than I expected who didn't like Veilguard, even though they had every reason to, from purely a fandom perspective, right? And again, like what I think sucks about the conversation around Veilguard is that so much of the focus goes to the weird chuds who like should be ignored in every way, in every scenario, with every game, in every possible situation, right? But what I think got ignored was the people who should have liked the game almost without question, who didn't. And there were a lot of them. And when you read it, and I won't pretend I fully understand their frustrations or their dislike for Veilguard, but I think it was always interesting getting some of those perspectives of people not liking the way that kind of the story was handled, that the choices that you had made in previous games were maybe impacted the Veilguard a little, but it was pretty minimal, and it was pretty dismissive of the things that had happened before, or the choices you had made, that specific characters that they brought back from the previous games to Veilguard, not everyone loved the way they were handled. And I found that really interesting, and honestly kind of has really impacted my thinking about the next Mass Effect. We won't get into that here, that's a different video. But I just I look back at how I felt about Veilguard, and almost to the point of I think I enjoyed it more, or I think I enjoyed it in general, because while I wasn't a fan already, I looked up videos about the lore from Dragon Age 1, Dragon Age 2, Inquisition, what the books, the comics, the I think a TV show or cartoon, whatever they did. I had a very high level basic understanding of the context of that series going into Veilguard, and it kind of made sense. And obviously I learned a lot more as I played the game and learned about the factions and relationships and all that. But I didn't go into it with that like encyclopedic knowledge of the franchise and the expectations that came along with that. And again, while obviously there were fans of the franchise who liked Veilguard, or kind of what it comes down to is, I think even the fans who did like it, it very much feels like the way I like Andromeda with Mass Effect, and that I don't think Andromeda is the best Mass Effect game. I think it's a okay game on its own. I don't think it really fully does a service to the franchise, but it's more Mass Effect, so it's fine. And I think there's a lot of that with Veilguard as well. It's like, oh, it's more Dragon Age, it's fine. But not everyone. Some people really dislike it who even care about the franchise. And to me, we look at what's happened since Veilguard came out. We see that for the most part, the majority of the team who made Veilguard, especially the leadership of it, they're all gone. That includes, from the production directors and the director of the game, and they're all at other studios, or they got transferred to other EA studios. Even like the writing staff, like Trick Weeks and people like that, who had been at BioWare forever, who had written some of the most legendary characters for all of their franchises, including Mass Effect, that they all got let go, or they quit with some persuasion, or whatever those situations were. And now we're in a situation where BioWare is a studio with like presumably 50 to 100 people working there. It's pretty much just the Mass Effect team at this point. The writing staff is presumably mostly new people. It's being led by an outsider, with Mary DeMarley coming over from, what was it, Square Enix or wherever she came from. Eidos Montreal, maybe. And it's, you know, things have changed a lot, and some people will celebrate and cheer that. Some people will say that that's what they needed. The writing was the bad part of Veilguard. And look, there were characters I didn't love in Veilguard. I think one of the more controversial ones to talk about was Tosh. And again, all the weirdo chuds didn't like them because of their, you know, announcing themselves as non-binary and things like that. That's all. I don't care about that. I don't think most normal people care about that. I found Tash just be kind of annoying. Like it wasn't kind of juvenile, and in there, it wasn't because of their identity. It was just their character. I just didn't vibe with them. And, you know, you have to, you know, preface when you say something like that, because I don't want to be included with one of the chud losers who didn't like that character because of their, you know, their identity politics, or however they framed it. For me, I just didn't really care for the character. And, you know, some of the side stuff in general, I didn't love. There were plenty of things I didn't like about Veilguard, even if I enjoyed the overall experience entirely. And, you know, you see moves like they made, and, you know, like getting rid of their writing staff, you know, be really derided by longtime BioWare fans and stuff like that, which makes sense. You see someone like Trick Weeks get let go, and you see all the characters they wrote, including me. I'm a big Tally stan for Mass Effect, and, you know, I'm under the impression Weeks was, you know, the one of the main writers for Tally. And, you know, that bums me out, right? Because, you know, I like the work they did with that character. But you also have to kind of look at it and, like, EA or BioWare or whoever made those decisions to get rid of those people made a pretty clear statement that they heard fans. Did they hear the right ones? Did they make these choices for the right reasons and with the right people? You know, we don't really know, and we won't for a while. And I guess we'll have to see how we feel about that, you know, when all of the cards get put on the table. So, you know, the only reason I wanted to make this video was because every time I post about what's going on with BioWare and Mass Effect, every time, you know, not a loud minority of the comments will be people being like, well, after Veilguard, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, man, Veilguard was a well-made game. Even if you didn't like the content, it was technically very sound. It was a really good example of them using the Frostbite engine. It was, I think, an entertaining story with an especially good final act. And, like, it was just proof that they can put out a well-made game in modern times, since Anthem and since Andromeda. You know, maybe you didn't like the content of the game, but I still found the quality of from a technical perspective at the very least, and the gameplay, which I thought was fun, you know, to be proof of, like, hey, this is a studio who can still make a good game. I'm still excited for the next Mass Effect. But obviously some of the people in my comments don't agree. I'm sure this video will get some of those people as well. But I just wanted to get that off my chest. And, you know, I still like Dragon Age the Veilguard. I think that, you know, it can be debated, you know, what its impact on the studio will be in the long run. But I think that we'll look back on it one day and people will play it in the future and say, like, oh, this was fine. But maybe that's just me. If you like Dragon Age, Mass Effect, BioWare, just gaming news in general, subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button so more people see the video. Leave a comment. Let me know what you're thinking. Don't be a jerk, though, because I will send you to the Shadow Realm. I promise. If you really want to support what I'm doing here, a little extra, consider becoming a YouTube member. You get videos like this one just a bit early, as well as some other perks. Check out the links in the description of the video for my podcasts, my merch store, you know, other ways you can support what I'm doing here. That's all I have for this one. So until next time.